Amen. Thank you and welcome everyone. Happy Sabbath to those that have entered the Sabbath and those that are yet to enter. Appreciate that you've accommodated me for this Vespers program. What I thought we would do today is address some of the questions that have been coming into me personally, and also questions that I hear raised in the Q&A sessions that I've been watching. And I would really appreciate your input, any comments, any questions you have. Please join in. Let's make this a communal discussion this morning. So the one question I won't be addressing is the apparent controversy over the dates 272 and 273. I won't be addressing that at this time. I do believe that it will be answered in due course, but for the purposes of today, I won't be addressing those dates. But what I would like to start with, I'll start off with the question. I've had two questions come to me this week regarding Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurges. So I can assume from the introduction that members have been keeping up reasonably well with presentations. I know that's not the case across the board. I get it. It's a lot and we have busy lives. So if there's anything I say that is not familiar, please say so. But I'm assuming everybody is familiar with Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurges. The symbol that we take from Acts 27, when we drop 273 as a symbol down into history and come to 273 and 272 BC. And in 273, Egypt sends ambassadors to Rome, and in 272, Rome returns the favour and sends ambassadors to Egypt. It's the first time that there is diplomatic relations between the King of the North the King of the South and Rome in that history. That delegation is headed by Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurges. And the question that came up was, how can you relate the meaning of the name Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurges to the Republican Party? So I think there comes a time in these studies when it helps us to go back to basics. We forget what was taught in the beginning, which is good for me because I forget things too. So Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurges Quintus means 5th month. It's a symbol that points to July. So we know that Quintus was in the Roman calendar, was the 5th month. When Julius Caesar added 2 months to that calendar and created the Julian calendar, Quintus became the 7th month and was renamed July. So Quintus is a symbol that points to a time, a date. I should say a time of year. So it is it's pointing us in a particular direction and at a particular time of year. So Quintus is 5th month in the Roman calendar, and 7th month in the Julian calendar. You typically got called Quintus if you were born in that month. Sometimes you got called Quintus if you were born in if you were the 5th child. We can assume that this Quintus Fabius Maximus Gurges was born in the 5th month because he held such a high position in the government and we don't know of any other siblings. So we assume he was probably firstborn. So he was a literal representative of Rome. So we can say that Quintus is pointing us to a particular time of year. Fabius is pointing us, some say it points us to the year, 2024 being the year of elections, but I think more correctly it points us to the electoral process, which is what is going to be the vessel of this this entity, this 7th kingdom. It's tied to the electoral process. And Maximus Gurges is our symbol for Sunday law, the maximum flood. So I know you're all familiar with that, but it is a question that has come up twice to me this week, in that how can then we relate it to the Republican Party? So yes, it points to July. When Quintus Quintilis was changed to July, when Julius Caesar added 2 months to the calendar, and the 5th month became the 7th month, because now there's a January and a February, he also renamed Quintilis to July after himself, in honor of himself. And Julius Caesar, if we look at the name Caesar, it's derived from a Punic word that means elephants, because Julius Caesar's earliest ancestors reportedly killed elephants in the Punic War. And he put the symbol of the elephant on the first denarius that he had printed once he took office. So we see the symbol elephant connected with Quintus, with the Republican Party, with Julius Caesar. So we can tie all those things together. So when we take QFMG and we place it at Sunday law, what it's doing is it's pointing to us to events. So it's pointing us to an activity of the Republican Party in the month of July. The symbols of the month and the July and the electoral process help us to direct Sunday law to that event. So our first witness was QFMG. But once we start unpacking the event, then our first witness becomes the event itself, and Quintus becomes our second witness, even though it was first chronologically, because the important thing is what actually happened. What does it all mean? So the QFMG is being questioned now because it's being said that this particular Sunday law message of July 18 being Sunday law hangs on one word, hangs on Quintus. And what I'd like to show is it hangs on a lot more than just Quintus. Quintus was a symbol that pointed us in the right direction, and evidence has built from there on. So the second question that came to me this week regarding that was, I wonder if QFMG is trying to get too much out of the name by getting a date out of it. Could it be that the name only means 5 and 7, and that we are marking votes and that a maximum flood is coming? So my response to that is, when we look at the name Quintus, it's a dictionary definition. you don't actually need second witnesses for a dictionary definition. Quintus comes from quintilis, which is July. So it's not something we can play around with. It's not a waymark that we can move. It is July, and you might say, well, it could be July 2023, or it could be July 2025, and make a case for that. But you can't shift it from July. Its very definition of being a month, which is a place in time, albeit 31 days, forces us to look at that particular month. And then we can add to that the idea of Julius Caesar changing the name to July and Caesar being related to elephants. So all those symbols then get packaged together. But quintilis itself, we're not making too much of it by turning it into time, because it is time. It's in its very definition. So any thoughts or comments on Quintus? Okay. So from there, another question I got asked was that I mentioned that the test before 2014 was to accept the date. Then we had to understand the event. How do you see the test for 2024? Before we had to accept the date, and now the test is to understand it. That's a question. So if we mark I'll just mark Sunday law as July 18, 2024. And let's go back and investigate 2014. So it was elder tests that said that our test leading up to 2014 was to accept the date, because the date was established on many witnesses. The use of the 25-20 time prophecy, and the dates that led us from the 126 that gave us 2014. So that was predicted in 2012. So from 2012 to 2014, we had to accept the date. And then after that, we have to unpack the event. And that took some years, because it wasn't until 2018 that the events of 2014 started to be unpacked. So that's quite a time difference. So we look back now on 2014 to understand what that Sunday law was. Up until this time, all we could do was accept the symbols and what they were pointing to. So when it comes to July 18, 2024, I would suggest that the test leading up to that was still unpacking 2014. The test after that is to unpack July 18. I don't think there was any test on us prior to that to accept the date at face value. Our test has always been to accept and unpack 2014, because when we do that, when we fully understand what 2014 represented, what occurred in that year, then July 18 becomes self-evident. And we can still unpack 2014 to wrap our heads around the Sunday law. So I hope that's clear. I don't think that we were being tested prior to here on this date. I think both tests are occurring now. It's different, similar but different to the 2014 test. So is there any thoughts or questions on that?
Could you remind us of sort of what some of the aspects around 2014?
Sure. Sure, so let's do that. Let's talk about 2014. So people have I've been asked this idea of there being a national Sunday law and a worldwide Sunday law, it's come across as new to a lot of people, when actually it's just a very old truth that we used to, that the movement used to teach back in with Elder Jeff, FFA, that first there was a national Sunday law and then there was a worldwide Sunday law. We get that from the history of ancient Rome and from other witnesses as well. And people have asked me, well, where was that taught? And I don't have the capability to go back into all of FFA's presentations and what Elder Jeff taught. It was kind of mixed in amongst everything, and I just don't have those videos anymore. But if you go back to 2012, so go to the midnightcry.org.uk, you know, that website, and you watch Elder Parminder's presentation from 2012, where he is predicting 2014, you'll see on his board work that he is predicting national Sunday law. So in 2012, he's going to use the 126 and predict 2014, and he's going to call that national Sunday law. There is a 10-year period between 2014 and 2024, and this also is a national Sunday law. You'll have to go about, it's a long video, you've got to go 3 hours into that presentation to where he's explaining national Sunday law, and then he will also explain the difference between national Sunday law and worldwide Sunday law. So for those that is new to, you can go back to 2012 and see that where that was taught. And when he taught it, he was teaching it as if it was just common knowledge. It wasn't anything new that he was teaching. So we knew that 2014 was national Sunday law. It wasn't until 2018 and Elder Tess starts to unpack what the events around 2014. The main event, if we could number them, the number one event is the purging of the Republican Party from moderates. So that was that. there's a whole list of things that occur in 2014. If you want to hear that listed out and explained, I think she comes up with about 30 of them. I think it's the first presentation that she does in 2022. Because at the end of 2021, everybody wants to know about Panium. Explain to us Panium. So on the 1st of January 2022, she says, you want to know about Panium? I'm going to explain to you 2014. And that's what that first presentation of 2022 unpacks. And really, it's nothing that hasn't been touched on since 2018, but it's a nice little package of 2014. So top of that list is the purging of the Republican Party. And off the top of my head, and somebody might like to help me, what the other, there's,
Mitch
I think this,
McConnell blocking.
Mitch,
Great minds
You
think
go.
alike.
Yeah.
Elder Terrie.
keep going, Debbie.
Mitch McConnell blocking the certification of SCOTUS justices.
Yes, and so this was the beginning of the stacking of the Supreme Court with conservative or loyalists. So that was the second one. And then there was a third that's to do with the United States government. The top three. And it's testing my memory as well. But I'm going to give you the fourth one. And that is Gamergate.
And it was interesting, Elder Terrie, you adding in terms of that article, as well as the manosphere, the inaugural meeting, and how closely it ties to Gamergate, really.
Yes.
That whole birth of, that whole misogynistic culture. I shouldn't say birth, because it had existed before.
So 2014 is where we can mark that America's values take a decided change. The direction of America and its relationship to its values is irrevocably changed here in 2014. It's going to start heading in a different direction. And there's, like I said, there's over 30 other major things that happen in that year that can all be threaded together, basically. But these are the top ones, and this in particular is what we watch with interest. So it's the purging of the Republican Party. So I've done some presentations on the work of Stephen Miller from 2014 onwards. So there are three men, Steve Bannon, Steve Miller, and Jeff Sessions, that we were directed to watch, and in particular, Steve Miller. And what Steve Miller recognized is that they needed to turn their base further right. So we understand that as a movement, we had to move from the right to the left. And what Stephen Miller recognized is he had to move the Republican base further right. You've got Steve Bannon there, who wants to change the world, but he sees the Republican Party as the vessel to begin that work. They've first got to change the Republican Party. And what Stephen Miller recognizes is that to change the Republican Party, you really got to start with the base. So these, and I can't remember what the third one was, But these have to do with pretty much starting top down of changing the Republican Party. Steve Miller wants to change bottom up. So I might just move this along. Actually, I'll just take out 2018 here. And I'm going to put in 2021. 2021 is Panium. And I want to mark, in particular, and Panium is like 2014. There are many things that happen in that year. And that's why at the beginning of 2022, Elder Tess is going to take us back to 2014 and say, don't just be looking for one thing. There are many things. And we should understand that from the name Panium anyway. If you think of Pandora's box, when it opens, there's just pandemonium. There's a lot of chaos. So I will though direct us to January 6th. So if we follow the work of Bannon, Miller, and Sessions from 2014, where they want to take control of the Republican Party, purge out the moderates. So they begin that work. When we get to 2021 and they lose the election, the Republican Party is in a real disarray. It's actually in the same position it was here that it was back here when it lost to Barack Obama. So they hold an autopsy and back here, and the more centrist members of the party, they want to become more centrist. They want to embrace Hispanics, immigrants. They realize that they need to become more central. Jeff Sessions, Steve Miller, and Bannon say, no, we've got to actually go the opposite way. So there's tension within the Republican Party. So when we get to 2021, there's still that very much that tension, because there are centrists still in the Republican Party that restrained Donald Trump during his first term in presidency. And when he lost that election and they had the January 6th counting of the votes, that process they do on January 6th to certify the election to say that Joe Biden won, it was the centrists that stopped that coup from happening. So in one sense, January 6th was a win for democracy. The institutions stayed strong. And the MAGA movement, the Sunday Law movement within the Republican Party, they didn't blame the institutions. What they blamed was the centrists in their own party. So the work that began in 2014 is now going to get amped up from January 6 onwards. So I'm glad you brought this up, Murray, because one of our members sent me some information this week that I wasn't privy to, that I wasn't aware of, that's really helpful. And a big shout out to Russell. Thank you so much. And it's the information that he sent is on, it's called Precinct Strategy. I'll write it here. So January 6th was a failure for Donald Trump and those and his supporters. And so just days after that, a man called Dan Schultz approached them and said, there is a better way to take over the Republican Party than what you've been doing. So I'll pull up some articles. And I'll share screen. So this is a ProPublica article, and they've written a few of these since January 6th. There was a few articles following this, but this takes us down to a time when Trump endorsed what the Republican Party were going to undertake from January 6th. So it says, Trump just endorsed an Oath Keepers plan to seize control of the Republican Party. The precinct strategy, widely promoted by Steve Bannon, has already inspired thousands of Trump supporters to fill local GOP positions intent on preventing a stolen election. Former President Donald Trump has officially endorsed a plan created by a man who has self-identified with the Oath Keeper militia that aims to have Trump supporters consolidate control of the Republican Party. The plan, known as the precinct strategy, has been repeatedly promoted on Steve Bannon's popular podcast. As ProPublica detailed last year, it has already inspired thousands of people to fill positions at the lowest rung of the party ladder. Though these positions are low profile and often vacant, they hold critical powers. They help elect higher ranking party officers, influence which candidates appear on the ballot, turn out voters on election day, and even staff the polling precincts where people vote and the election boards that certify the results. And then it will say what Trump said regarding it. I just heard about an incredible effort underway that will strengthen the Republican Party, Trump said Sunday in a statement emailed to his supporters. If members of our great movement start getting involved, that means you becoming a precinct committeeman for your voting precinct. We can take back our great country from the ground up. Trump's email named Dan Schultz, an Arizona lawyer and local party official who first developed the precinct strategy more than a decade ago. Schultz spent years trying to promote his plan and recruit precinct officers. In 2014, he posted a call out to an internal forum for the Oath Keepers militia group, according to hacked records obtained by ProPublica. So you can look that up yourself, but we can mark that precinct strategy. It's starting in 2014. Dan Schultz from the militia group. And it's the same strategy that Stephen Miller knew that they had to achieve, is to take control of the base. He wanted to take control of the base and move them further right. What Dan Schultz is doing is taking control of the base and getting them involved at the lowest rung of the Republican ladder. And what was pointed out to me, which I thought was interesting, is this precinct strategy is actually being put into practice at the same time that the messages in the movement were about the importance of middle management and organisation. So I thought that was an interesting thought that would do well to chew on. So we have two movements. The movement, the Sunday Law movement, the MAGA movement, and we also have our movement. And both realise the importance not only of organisation, but the importance of bottom up in order to become a successful movement. So on that note,
Elder
see if
Terrie,
I-
is the 0.3 Burwell v. Hobby Lobby?
yes, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. A Supreme Court decision on religious liberty, and that would have a ongoing effect through the law courts and decisions to come. So thank you for that. Okay, so precinct strategy. I might try and play a video. It's very short. Let me know if it works. It's not coming up on my screen. Like, how do I make sure that you can actually hear the video?
When you go
Oh.
to share screen, when you click on share
Yes.
screen, in that panel there
Ah,
should be a button that says share sound.
share sound. Okay, thank you very much.
Democrats are pushing a radical Marxist agenda, while weak Republicans let it happen. Do you feel helpless? Want to know how to fight back? Well, here's the answer. The PrecinctStrategy.com is a free resource on how to become your local
Sorry,
GOP
Terry,
precinct.
we hear the sound, but
Precinct
we don't see the
committeemen help
video.
elect county chairmen and even delegates to the RNC. There are over 400,000.
Sorry, Tabo, you can't see it?
Yes, we hear the sound, but we can't see the video. So when you hit share screen, you need to click on the actual window that the video is in, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Sorry, I know this Zoom stuff is a headache, but yeah.
No. So sorry about that.
That's okay. So in the share screen, it'll have boxes with all the windows that you have open. Just click on the one that the video is in and it will share that one specifically.
Elder Terrie, I think it was embedded in your article when you first displayed the article on the screen. The video that you were playing, I think, was embedded in that article.
Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yes, can see it now.
So if I open the video,
Yep. Yeah.
can you see the
Yep.
video?
Yes.
So I'm going to press play.
Democrats are pushing a radical Marxist agenda, while weak Republicans let it happen. Do you feel helpless? Want to know how to fight back? Well, here's the answer. The PrecinctStrategy.com is a free resource on how to become your local GOP precinct committeeman. Precinct committeemen help elect county chairmen, officers, and even delegates to the RNC. There are over 400,000 committeeman seats across the U.S., but what the GOP establishment doesn't want you to know is that 200,000 of those seats are vacant. We need America First patriots to fill these seats. It's time to fight and kick the rhinos out. Help take back our party. You can make a difference, and PrecinctStrategy.com will show you how. Take action now. Be a warrior. Help save this great country. Visit PrecinctStrategy.com now.
So did that play?
Yes, it did.
Okay. So you get the idea that what January 6th got them to focus on was the establishment, the rhinos within the party. This work began in 2014. What's going to happen from 2021 onwards is it's going to get amped up. It gets amped up from the base upwards by getting more people involved at the very lowest rung, at the precinct level, filling positions, like it said, that are mostly vacant. So the work continues from 2021, and we see that in full completion by July 18, 2024. As the video said, by working at the precinct level, they actually help to vote in the delegates that will attend the RNC. So it's not trickle down, it's bottom up control of the Republican Party. So that's why one of the questions that comes up about Quintus is that July 18 is just hanging on a name. But what doesn't get addressed, I don't hear getting addressed in a lot of Q&As, is the relationship between 2014 and July 18. That we could look back and unpack 2014 and see the beginning of a huge shift in the Republican Party and how that was going to grow and how it comes to its completion at the RNC in 2024. So any thoughts or questions on that?
Well, I just think that's profound, you know, that of course there's the witness that is given by the name, right, and all that entails. But of course, we take it back to 2014, and you have you can identify a work that began there, and you're seeing its culmination in July. I hadn't seen that before.
No, I hadn't seen that before. I've traced, and you've probably seen, the work of Stephen Miller through that period. But to see the work of these militia groups members, how they started in 2014. So, like, as Debbie said, we've got the first inaugural Manosphere Convention in 2014. We've also got the militia groups or the Oath Keepers starting their work within the Republican Party. And we see the work of Stephen Miller. So there's 3 witnesses right there in 2014 of the work that is, you can see the importance they see in taking control of the Republican Party. It becomes this is the dragon beginning to rise. This is the beast that needs to be ridden by the MAGA movement. It has to be fully in control by the MAGA movement by July 18. There was another article sent me that I thought was really good too. And I'll just bring that up. I'll just read a couple of paragraphs from it. So this is from Esquire magazine. Inside Democracy's MAGA-led suicide attempt. So there is a book, and it's by Isaac Arnsdorf. He is a Washington Post journalist, and it's called Finish What We Started, the MAGA Movement's Ground War to End Democracy. And it's a very interesting read. I've only just started it, but this is an interview with this author. And this was published on May 21, 2024, because the book came out before the election. The book came out before the RNC, actually. In February 2021, a lawyer named Dan Schultz showed up as a guest on the War Room with Steve Bannon to promote a political strategy he'd first learned about in 7th grade civics. Local party precincts, the bottom rung of the Republican Party structure, he argued, was where all the action was. Sounding a little breathless, he explained that if War Room listeners wanted to take over the Republican Party, the place to do it was at the precinct level, by nominating themselves to be precinct committee chairpeople. It was fundamentally democratic, workaday notion, almost a little boring, but it hit a nerve with listeners who were already sold on the big lie that the 2020 election had been stolen. Not by Democrats. That they were crooked was given, but by Republicans, too lily-livered to take a stand for Trump's rightful victory. The party needed a MAGA takeover, and it needed one fast. And then it goes on to interview the author of that book. So yeah, that book is a really good read. It's called Finish What We Started. When did it start? 2014. When did it amp up? Panium, 2021, because this is where we mark the rise of the Seventh Kingdom. This is where the agitation begins that will be completed at Sunday Law. So going back to your question, Murray, I would recommend, I'm pretty sure it's the first study of 2022 by Elder Tess, where she will go through a lot of the, in fact, it might even take 2 studies because I think she doesn't finish it in the first one from memory, where she unpacks 2014. So I'm suggesting that we were to continue packing 2014 right up till here. That understanding this date was never a test before the date. If we unpack 2014, the more we understand about it, the more we can see and recognize July 18. It becomes self-evident. And so in some of the arguments against July 18, just saying, well, it's only hanging on Quintus, what gets left out of that argument is its relationship to 2014 and that 10-year history, that bookend of National Sunday Law to National Sunday Law. And again, to understand National Sunday Law, go back and watch 2012, where Parminder explains the difference between them both.
Terrie, it's Murray again. I kind of had a thought. We talk about 1979 to 89, that 10-year lead up, and the wanting to take over the Republican Party and get Ronald Reagan elected, that sort of idea. And it's sort of almost, it's very similar aspect to this in some way. It's a 10-year period and it's a buildup. But that was, back then, it was the church who was trying to get Ronald Reagan elected. And now you're talking about, in your last, the MAGA movement being a more complex aspect of being the church. It actually represents the church. And you brought up, when you first started discussing the July 18th date, you talked about the threefold union. And is this the MAGA movement, this threefold? It's a much more complex church because it involves the threefold union coming together to be a church, as it were. I don't know if you've got any comments or ideas on that aspect.
No, I think that's well put. I think what we see here is the coming together of church and state. That's the sin of the United States. That's the church riding the beast. So we have to see church is looking a little different to what we used to see and recognize church. You know, church was a building with a cross on it, where it was very religious. We now understand church as a much broader meaning and brings in culture, you know, societal norms, etc. So it's when society wants to direct the government. And that's might sound like democracy, but it's not a democratic republic. So that's the difference between a democracy and a democratic republic, is the republic side of it is about law, having checks and balances, making sure that the majority can't rule over a minority. It protects people's rights. A pure democracy is when the people just rule. So we have to remember that America was founded as a democratic republic. And when you take away the republic side of it, the rule of law, and it becomes just a republic where the society, where the people rule, that's a very dangerous place for minorities. It does away with human rights. So yes, I think, as you said, Murray, that there's a threefold union, and that threefold union, I guess, is what I'm trying to make sure I say. I may say this and then have to correct myself later. That threefold union makes up MAGA. So we see the religious right, apostate Protestantism. We see Catholicism there, represented by J.D. Vance, and we see atheism represented by the Barstool that's a broad group as well. All of those things make up MAGA, which becomes the church that's going to ride the beast. The beast it needs to ride is the Republican Party. It's the conduit, or I guess the mechanism by which it can take control of the country. So it's still not in control. So we're living between Sunday laws, seventh movement is rising. So we mark this the taking of the glorious land, but it's still ongoing. So we have to juggle in this time period that we are in the agitation of the worldwide Sunday law. So the world's getting agitated. At the same time, the glorious land is still being conquered. Wasn't all done and dusted on July 18th. They just had their beast to ride through this history. So if you go back to Rome, pagan Rome, between the overtaking of the Sunday law and the Battle of Actium, there was actually civil war. You've got the story of Pompey, the story of Julius Caesar, both of them get assassinated. Then you've got Mark Antony, and then you've got Octavian. I would suggest that all four of them represent Trump and Trumpism at some level. They all represent Rome. And all of that is going to go on between Daniel 11 verse 16 and the Battle of Actium. So we're seeing a lot happen in this history with as the party takes over the glorious land. It's still getting some kickback, but it's dying. It's, you know, sorry, the kickback is dying off. The party is winning. Of course, we know it won November 5, and then we see the inauguration on January 20. And that's another point, because I've said that January 2025 was July 18 on steroids. And somebody commented that I was saying that that makes January 20 a better Sunday law than July 18. That's not what I was saying. That's not what I was meaning. We would expect that the Seventh Kingdom is rising. We would expect to see a more emboldened, more powerful Republican Party on January 20 than July 18, if that was even possible. If you saw any of the footage of July 18 at the RNC, but you compare that to January 20, and all the pod bros are there, all the tech bros are there, all the billionaires are there. If this was a manosphere, we can mark a manosphere here in 2014. July 18, you can all picture Hulk Hogan tearing his shirt off. Come down to January 20, there's no t-shirts being pulled up. They're in suits and ties. They're looking really good because they've made it. So that doesn't mean January 20 is a better Sunday law than July 18. It's not Sunday law at all. It's just showing us the rise of the Seventh Kingdom taking control. I think it's significant, but it doesn't make it a Sunday law. You can't move Quintus. Quintus is solid. It was said that I'm moving on Quintus. I'm not moving on Quintus. I just stopped talking about it because I thought everybody understood it. It's right here. So you didn't really have a question, Murray. That was, you had a really good comment. Did I? Are we on the same page?
Yeah, I think so. I like the precinct strategy. It really shows how the church, as it were, mega movement, took control of the base, that base. It got involved in creating the beast that it's going to ride to, and that was the same thing with the right, Protestant rights in the 10 years, the 79 to 89 aspect. But they got the vote out and they were trying to get it. They just didn't have enough people. So they had to put their hand across to the Catholics and the atheists and all come together to create this beast, as it were, that they could then control to have what the type of society that they want to have, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can definitely see that coming about. And I do see what you mean about you're seeing a increase to the worldwide Sunday law. You're going to see an increase of that control and of probably the mega movement pushing agendas, perhaps.
Even in the last couple of weeks, a judge says, turn the planes around, and they go, no. They're just so emboldened. And I think something else you just said there reminded me. I've lost it. What did you say? In 2014, they wanted to overtake the Republican Party. It wasn't about them. Actually, so Steve Miller, let me back up. The establishment, the leaders of the Republican Party, they wanted to embrace immigrants and embrace Hispanics. What Steve Miller has done, what they've done down here, is they have embraced them, but what they've done is they've taken them to the right. And they've taken them to the right through the pod bros through the manosphere. They've taken the disaffected men from the Black community, from the Hispanic community, from the immigrant community, and taken them right. So when we talk about precinct level, it's not just MAGA just being, you know, white American males. It actually embraces all cultures, all nationalities, because we know that the manosphere patriarchy exists in all those, in every culture. And they've been able to harness that. So let me repeat that. I don't think I was really clear. 2014, the centrists, they wanted to embrace other cultures, but from a different perspective, from a centrist perspective. What the MAGA movement has done is embraced them, taken them to the right by getting them to embrace the manosphere, to get them to embrace right-leaning politics. And that was done through the manosphere, through the podcasts. So, yes, disaffected males in every community were harnessed through this precinct strategy. Oh, thank you, Murray. And so, yes, so we're seeing this agitation of the world during this time period, but we're also seeing that the glorious land is still in process of being conquered. Sunday law is a point and a period. So national Sunday law is a point and a period. The church has its beast. Now it has to ride through this history. And it's trampling down all in its path. So any other comments or thoughts on so far?
I was just going to add, Elder Terrie, that I can remember with Steve Bannon, and it may actually even have been Dan Schultz, that he was sort of referencing, but he was talking about learning, and it possibly is this phrase, precinct strategy, so I'm guessing it would have been Dan Schultz, but learning this fantastic way of gaining control. And he mentioned in terms of school boards and getting people running for some of these school board positions, and just really, and involving the women, and, you know, Mums for Liberty and all the other different things that grew out as a result from that. And it's powerful when you think of it. You know, grassroots activism has always been very powerful, but, you know, this is, as you said, the three-pronged approach, Dan Schultz and Steve Bannon, and yeah, I mean, it just works.
And you notice that they're all focused on the party. They're not actually focused on the country. We've got to rid the party of the rhinos. We've got to take over the party. That's the first step. That's the image we are meant to see and recognize. So that's why I suggest that this is where the image to the beast, to the kingdom number 5, is set up here on July 18. The 7th kingdom is on full display, and it has made an image to the 5th beast. The 5th beast being the papacy riding the kings of Europe. Same but different. we've just always expected the church to look like a particular church. But the Midnight Cry message has taught us to see the church as a much broader institution. Okay. So might have time for another question. Yes, go on.
Elder Terrie, this is Annabelle.
Hello, Annabelle.
I'm sorry I came in late, but I just wanted clarity on the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. So when we say that beast, are we talking about like the Republican Party that's being ridden right now? Or is that something else?
No, it is all included. So usually when we talk about the dragon and the beast and the false prophet, we recognize that they can represent different institutions, but also different religions. So the dragon, so the beast, that's evident, that's Catholicism. The false prophet, apostate Protestantism. And when we talk about the beast, when we talk about the dragon, we usually talked about that as being an atheistic power, that the dragon was atheism. But it embraces a lot of cultures, a lot of different groups. So it is a threefold union that I guess I did that study at the International Camp meeting that we see joining there on July 18. At the same time, we can look at that grouping of religions and thoughts and cultures, and they are going to ride a beast. They're going to ride the dragon. So the church needs a civil power in order to enforce its dogmas. So the church in our history becomes more complex than the 1260, because this was just one church and one set of dogmas. What is being imposed on society today is not just a church's dogmas, it's a way of it's a
perhaps a separate culture.
I think culture is just probably the better word, isn't it? It's just a particular culture. It's American exceptionalism that is being, it's how they view America, and they view it. So integralism, Protestantism, and the Barstool conservatives, what they have in common is their view of the United States of America, what it should look like, how it should behave. In order to impose that on the country at large, it needs a civil power to ride, to control, and to do that work for it. So we call that civil power the dragon. Even though we recognize that the dragon also has a religion associated with it. We used to, as I said, recognize that as atheism, but it's much broader than atheism. It embraces all the isms, any ism you can think of, other than Catholicism and Protestantism. It's all the rest of the isms.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, there's a bit of a conundrum there, isn't there? When you've got a dragon that is a part of the threefold union, which represents the church power, but then there's the dragon that is the actual beast, the mechanism by which the church is going to ride.
Oh, it just seems so inconsistent, because if the beast is the papacy, then the beast, the papacy can't ride itself, and so it's usually church over, it's the woman that rides the beast, and so the woman being the church, and so the church riding the beast, and we say beast represents the papacy, so the papacy can't ride itself.
Okay, so maybe that's a good place to start with our next session.
Okay. Thank you.
We might just start with Revelation 12 and work through that. So we have, if that's okay, we have 5 minutes left in this one. So why don't we make a start? Annabelle, have you got a Bible handy on your device or a book?
Yes.
All right. So the tricky thing with the beast in Revelation is we've got to recognize the difference in symbols, because sometimes the papacy is just a beast, and sometimes it is a woman riding a beast. It all depends on the story being told in a particular chapter. So if we went to Daniel, it's a horn on a beast. So we recognize that there are only 4 kingdoms of Bible prophecy: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. 4 kingdoms. But the 4th kingdom has 3 different phases: pagan Rome, papal Rome, and modern Rome.
Yes.
If we go to Revelation 12, it's the chapter that gives us all 3. So, so if you're in Revelation 12, perhaps if somebody could read, just read verse 1. For volunteer.
And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars.
So at the start, we need to use the disclaimer that there is some very ugly symbology in the Bible. When the church is referred to as a woman and the state as beasts, so if we can just get past that for today, we can change names where we can. But so here we've got John. He's seeing a sign. That word wonder is a sign or a symbol. He's looking up into heaven. Now we know there's 3 heavens. There's the heaven where our clouds are, our atmosphere. There's the 2nd heaven where the sun, moon, and the stars are. And then there's the 3rd heaven where God lives. So where is he looking? He's looking in the 2nd heaven, because there's sun and moon and stars here. So he's looking in the 2nd heaven, and he sees a symbol of a church. And that church has organization. The organization here is represented by the sun and the moon and the stars. We know that if we went back to Revelation chapter 8 and we looked at the 4th trumpet, you'll remember, I think it's the heraldai from memory. Let's have a look. Yeah, Odoacer and the heraldai. It's the 4th trumpet, and we see that the kingdom of the heraldai has sun, moon, and stars, and it's the government. The sun was, I think, their emperor. The moon was their judicial system, and the stars was, I think, their consulate or their senate or something like that. And it gets swept away. So here we see a church, and it's got 12 stars. And we I guess traditionally Seventh-day Adventists have looked at this as the beginning of the Christian church. Its organization is begins with the 12 disciples. So organization of the Christian church. The Christian church has a baby, and it's a painful delivery, but baby comes, and who's ready to kill the baby? A beast.
The dragon.
The dragon. So again, there's another sign or a symbol in the second heaven, and it's a great red dragon. It's got 7 heads, 10 horns. And in verse 4, this dragon's tail is going to draw a third part of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. Now, these aren't the stars that are on the church. These are other stars out there in the second heaven, because this is the transition from ancient Israel to the new spiritual Israel, the Christian church. And what pagan Rome did is it took away a third of the organization of old Israel. So the church prior to the Christian church, or we've got 2 churches at the same time consecutively. We've got the Christian church and we've got the Jewish church. And the Jewish church had 3 levels of organization: kings and priests and Sanhedrin. And what pagan Rome did, and this is 63 BC, this is the Sunday law of Daniel 11:16, is it takes away the kings. Takes a third of the third part away from the Jews, the Jewish religion, and it's just left with the priests and the Sanhedrin. So that's what that's about. So here we can see the transition between two churches. We see the emergence of the Christian church in 4 BC with the birth of the man-child, or you could say 27 with the baptism, whatever. And we see pagan Rome's interaction with the church there. It's going to sweep away the organization of the previous church, but it's also going to try and kill the man-child of the new Christian church. So we'll stop it there for time, and we'll come back, and we just want to follow this church and this dragon through Revelation 12. Okay? So we can review that when we come back. So I'll close in prayer. Our loving God in heaven, we thank you for this time that we can spend together. I thank you for the voices that have added to the conversation, both through the week and today. It helps us to bring more clarity. It can't be just one voice alone. You know that when we watch the counterfeit movement, how it is the middle management that really creates success. So for the movement, help us to know what and understand what that means for us. So as we take a break now, be with us, help us to relax our mind and body and come back fresh. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.